Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ozoz Sokoh. I'm not exactly qualified to lead this because most of my work is in food, but I am excited to host this book chat with Kagiso Molope from South Africa and Oyinkan Braithwaite from Nigeria. I will introduce them, tell you a little bit about who they are and what they've written and what we're going to be reviewing today. And then I'm going to have them read from their books. I'll ask them a few questions, and then we'll throw it open to the audience. Kagiso Molope is a South African-Canadian author and playwright. She is the winner of the 2014 Percy Fitzpatrick Prize and an IBBY Honor List alum. Her books are read in schools across South Africa, Canada, and Europe. Her novels are Dancing in the Dust, The Mending Season, This Book Betrays My Brother, which is the one we'll be looking at today, and Such a Lonely, Lovely Road. A graduate of the University of Cape Town, she's now in the master's program in English literature at Carleton University. Her play, Maya Angelou, Black Woman Rising, has been produced by Oslo's Nordic Black Theatre. She's here for the books, the talks, and the awesome Nigerian jollof rice, but not necessarily in that order. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oyinkan Braithwaite is a graduate of creative writing and law from Kingston University. Following her degree, she worked as an assistant editor at a publishing house before freelancing as a writer and editor. She has had short stories published in anthologies and has also self-published work. In 2014, she was shortlisted as a top 10 spoken word artist in the Echo Poetry Slam. In 2016, she was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. She is the author of My Sister, the Serial Killer, which won the 2019 LA Times Award for Best Crime Thriller, the 2019 Morning News Tournament of Books, and was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2019. My Sister, the Serial Killer has been translated into 5 languages and has also been optioned for film. Welcome, Oyinkan. For me, when I haven't read both books, the thing that strikes me the most is family, sibling dynamics, relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, so romance, family relationships, parents, different relationships with parents, but also different perceptions from society of how a daughter should be, what a son should be, mother is, where the father is present, and there's this complex web. And I think the one thing I left with was life is complex. And I know that sounds very cliched, but that's just the thing that struck me, because in both books, the relationships are so dynamic, so many conflicts, some resolved, the concept of ride or die, like who's that person that will stick for me and stand out for me? So I'm gonna start with you and ask you a question. Why did you write This Book Betrays My Brother?
So there was there was a famous case in South Africa going on where a very highly respected politician was accused of rape. And when I went back, so I don't live back and forth sometimes, but when I went back into the country, I discovered that the accused was being ostracized, and the accused was being celebrated and almost sort of experiencing a revival in his political career because of the case that a lot of women who had known and loved him for a long time were at the forefront of this movement of vilifying the accuser and accusing, but the thing that was interesting for me was that they were not accusing her of lying. They were just angry with her for daring to go public about his crime. And I was very curious about who we're loyal to, who we think we owe our loyalty to. And this book came out as sort of because she had to go into exile. And so this book came out as a lot of my books do, as a sort of love letter to the accuser, and in great support of her, and sort of a way of praising her for having stood up to this man. Yeah.
So, I don't want to give away spoilers, but I hope that you've read the book. If not, it's available outside, I think. It's not? Oh, okay. But you should find it. But in the story, there's a lot, there's an incident of rape, and loyalties become divided. People you expect to stand in the way of truth or for truth don't. And it's very twisted, but I'll be honest and say that it mirrors real life, because we've seen those things where, you know, the person, you know, why did she wear the short skirt? And the victim becomes the accused in the end. I liked how forthright you were with the story. It was very clear, all the different elements, the points of view. And from the very beginning, you built up to that point. So I like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Oyinkan, comic, dark, crime thriller. I dare say first in Nigeria. Why did you write the book?
Which one? Why did I write dark comic, or why did I write, or just?
I mean, why? I mean, I feel like both of them are linked. So why did you choose this genre? Why did you write the story you wrote, involving siblings, involving familial relationships, set in Lagos?
Okay. I didn't think I was writing crime, and to be honest, when people force me to, you know, because it's actually been classified as different things. Some people say crime, some people say thriller, some people say psychological thriller. You know, some people call it a family drama. It's been classified as a lot of different things. But when I was writing it, I didn't label it. I was just telling a story, and the labeling happened afterwards. You know, it was after, I don't even think I had that discussion with my editors. I think it was after the book was published, and the critics, the literary critics, started to label it, you know, and it was through one of those early articles that I realized the book was funny, because if you had asked me, I wouldn't have said it was comic either. So I discovered a lot of stuff after the fact. As for why I wrote it for myself. At the time, I was actually writing a different novel, and this was going to be the great novel, and it was refusing to be great. So I thought, okay, you know, I need to write something that's lighter. I need to complete a story, because I've done 2 novels before, but and I know it's not unique to me, but I struggle to complete stories. You know, halfway through, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is rubbish. I hate it, and I'll start a completely different story. So I wanted to get out of doing that, and I said, you know, you're going to write this story, and you're going to finish it. You're going to be done with it in a month. Yes. So at the time,
a month.
At the time, it was a novella. It wasn't the size. I mean, it's not a big book now, but at the time, it was like half the size it is now. So I gave myself a couple of parameters. You're going to write a novella. You're going to be done in a month. You're going to finish the story no matter what. And I kind of had a roadmap, because 10 years earlier, I had written 2 poems that kind of sort of guided this particular story. So it was almost as if I had plotted it out 10 years prior, and it was just to, I mean, I had changed as a writer, I changed as an individual, so there are a lot of things that are different, but yeah, it was just to flesh it out, and, you know, and because I didn't intend for it to be published at the time, it's what gave me the freedom to say, okay, I'm gonna write 2 sentences, I've written 2 sentences, I'm done with this chapter, and, you know, start another chapter, because I actually wouldn't have thought anybody would publish that. You know, you think of chapters as, you know, at least 5 pages, or 3 to 7, or, you know, 10 pages. So I didn't think anybody would buy to this idea of a 2-sentence chapter, or a 1-page or half-a-page chapter. So it's a book I really just wrote for myself.
So, would you consider it to be literary or commercial fiction? What do you think?
So, when it was about to be published, and I was talking to my UK editor, he said, because he's a literary editor, and he said, look, that he thinks that my book is on the edge. Like, it's still in commercial, but it kind of also has like a foot in or leg in literary fiction. And at the time it was news to me, but at the same time it didn't really, writing it, I wasn't concerned with any of that. I wasn't thinking, oh, is this literary, is this commercial, you know, how are people, because I wrote it for myself. And I'm looking back, I'm so grateful that I didn't have, because to be honest, those are the kind of thoughts that shackle you a lot of the time. So I'm glad that this story was completely for myself and I didn't have those things to worry about. I just think it's a good story.
Yeah.
I think so too. Thank you. How important was it for you to take the story back to South Africa? What were your thoughts? What were your feelings? What was the reception? Did you care much about that?
Yeah, so I have a lot of feminist friends in South Africa, so I was very naive about taking it back to the country. I think I thought I was going to go back and we were going to have book talks. I was invited to a writers' festival in Durban, and I thought, oh, we're going to go, we're going to sit on stage and chat, and it's going to be fantastic. And it went south very quickly. When I was at the festival, we ended up getting verbally attacked by a lot of men. I was in a talk like this, and a lot of men would cut me off very quickly as soon as I started talking about the case. And they kept forcing me to acknowledge that he was never found guilty, and so they just stayed on the case and kept saying, well, you have to keep saying allegedly, like we don't know what she was on about, we don't know that she was right, you have to stay neutral. But they were very angry, and the energy was very angry during the festival, and so it didn't have such a great reception from that part of the audience. And I think there was a lot of conflict even between the women in the audience and the men. So I think South Africa really hasn't moved to a point where you can write a book like this and then go back and think it'll be just well received. I think it made a lot of people very angry. And then my publisher tried to get it into schools, because my last 2 books are in schools in South Africa, and they tried to get into schools, and they were told that no, the way that the story ends is very infuriating. But it's actually the most realistic ending, actually, considering the situation, the war against women's bodies in South Africa right now. The ending makes the most sense. And that book was written for young adults, and I thought it would be really insulting to give this sort of beautiful, happy ending. Because I would like to think that when these books go into schools, that they spark discussion. So I didn't want to, insult them. I know that they're living in this situation. It's very real for them. And I wanted the end to make sense.
And I mean, it was an interesting end for me. I'll let you guys read it and judge for yourselves. But I think the book was beautifully crafted.
Thank you.
I'd like to read a few of my favorite bits from the book, from your book and from yours. I'll start with yours. Thank you. I like to imagine that there are people in the world for whom uncomplicated truths remain. These people may go to the end of their lives without having these truths tested, without ever losing a grip on the things they've always counted on, without feeling that deeply disconcerting sense of their world crumbling around them. I'm not one of those people. In this scene, the sister to the brother who this book is about, the sister who sort of does the betrayal, is reflecting on what she's done and what effect that has had on her family. One thing I think about is how childhood hurts often become adult traumas if they're unresolved. And I feel like there's a lot of that in this story. So in addition to talking about rape culture in the story, what's that thing about family and friendships? Because there were a number of friendships, sister to siblings, between girlfriends, between boys, between different people in different social groups. What was important about capturing and sharing that for you?
Well, with the family in particular, I think family narrative of our experience of trauma usually shapes how we move forward from it, right? And whether or not we talk about it honestly is what determines what happens in the future and how and if we heal, right? So I wanted to put this story within the family relationships because I wanted to show how deep it goes, how deep this loyalty for men goes, and where it usually begins, right? I mean, you see at the beginning of the book, she begins with the birth, with her brother's birth, right? We were at a book talk at a school, and I read the beginning of the book, and the boys were saying, well, what does him being a baby have anything to do with the story? And it was important for me to say that men are celebrated a lot of the time even before they're born or right at birth, right? When we find out that a boy has been born into the family, the story of the family changes a lot of the time. So I wanted to play the relationships, I wanted to kind of have a very clear, very, very vivid picture of the relationships within the family, because those are what determine what kind of man he becomes, and also they help us understand how he could have done what he did, and the dilemma that the sister has in telling or not telling. And the biggest problem that I had with the book, it took me a long time, it took me 3 drafts to write it, because I couldn't get this one thing right. And in the end, when it won the Percy Fitzpatrick award, they said that was the thing that got it to win the award. But what I struggled with was I really, really needed the reader to love the brother from the very beginning. It was important to me, because if you didn't love the brother, then you wouldn't understand her dilemma as much. You couldn't take the journey with her to the end. So yeah, family relationships are very much at the center of this.
And I think that came through very strongly. So the brother is accused of rape. The sister actually witnesses him commit the crime. But she loves her brother, so she's torn. And this concept of ride or die, and how far you go when there's a transgression, when something is broken. But he was also incredibly good looking and charming, and he did everything right, and he was her personal person as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could feel all the emotion, the angst, the confusion. I think you did a good job of painting
you.
that picture
Thank you.
very well.
Thank
Do you know what? I've been asked a lot, like, what books are like my book. So when we were talking outside, like, I think I found the book, you know, because even when you were, you've been talking about how charming he is and how it was important for you to make sure that the reader loved the brother,
Yeah.
you know, and that was what was important for me as well, because Ayola is the person who commits the crimes, and you know, but it was important for me that she not be this, because it's easy for us to distance ourselves from someone who immediately comes across as evil, but that's not true to life.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, you know, the reality is that a lot of these crimes are committed by people close to us, right? Like a lot of especially with sexual assault, a lot of the crimes are committed by people we know, and we tend to distance ourselves from this idea of the perpetrator of any kind of crime, because we think that wouldn't happen in my house. And I think it was important with my book, and I wonder if it was with yours too, to bring the criminal into, like, make it intimate and bring them into the home.
Yeah, because I think there was another story that I also didn't finish, but I was thinking about it a lot about, you know, we witness crimes, you know, we hear about these things that take place. At the time, I was thinking about terrorism, but these people belong to a family, and what would it be like if it was someone you loved, you know, and how do you? I remember watching this TV show the other day, and it was a guy was killed, but it was an American show, and he was on the sexual offenders list, and they come to tell her that his son is dead, and she says, "Oh, I'm sure you're happy, but he was my son. You know, I'm sure, like, 'cause to you, he's just this criminal that was killed. You know, you're probably thinking he got what was coming to him, as most of us would. But she gave birth to him. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, apart from the fact that people can be close to us, I think we're not so far, I don't believe that we're so far away from committing something heinous ourselves, and I think it's another way of sort of examining the human condition, you know?
The complexity of relationships, that's the thing that keeps reverberating, just how so many aspects and so many dilemmas. But now I'm going to read from My Sister the Serial Killer, and this is early on in the book. I was about to eat when she called me. I had laid everything out on the tray in preparation. The fork was to the left of the plate, the knife to the right. I folded the napkin into the shape of a crown and placed it at the center of the plate. The movie was paused at the beginning credits, and the oven timer had just rung when my phone began to vibrate violently on my table. By the time I get home, the food will be cold. I stand up and rinse the gloves in the sink, but I don't remove them. Ayola is looking at my reflection in the mirror. Sometimes we get calls that literally make us pause, drop everything. Like, she was in the middle of, I like the way you painted that scene, how she had to kind of put a number of things on hold: hunger, pleasure, rest. This sister had a fairly tasking job at a hospital, but she dropped everything because this sister of hers called, and she basically went running. I know people ask if you have sisters, and that concept of my personal person, what's it about that is at the center of this dilemma? What do you know? Like that sisterhood, not just the sisterhood of friendship, but the sisterhood of, you know, birth.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two sisters and a brother, and to be honest, the girl after me, we're the closest in age. We're 2 years apart, and honestly, I think she would cast me immediately. Like, I don't think she would, you know, she's the goody two shoes in the family, so I think she would betray me in a heartbeat. But I think what's interesting about sisterhood, which I've experienced, and I guess as I was writing this, was that, and I've spoken to a lot of people who have sisters, and they say yes, and I think it's that like you said, it's a complex relationship. So there are times when I think I've out and out hated my sister, especially the one who's often, because we're the closest in age, we grew up together, and sometimes in my life, if you caught me, I would have been this close to saying I hate this girl, I really don't like her, but if she needed anything from me, I would do it, and I wouldn't think twice about it. Whatever she needs, I'll be there. And I don't know if it's because I'm the eldest, but I do get the sense that, well, I said she would betray me in a heartbeat, but I also do get the sense that she would, she does look out for me. She makes sure that I'm okay. She's the kind of person who'd be like, oh, I didn't like what you're wearing. Even this year, I've been touring quite a bit, and Abafke likes to check out what I've packed to make sure that I've packed appropriate clothing. So if you've seen any picture and I look nice, it's probably thanks to her. But yeah, she makes sure that everything is okay. And I think that's interesting that there's that dynamic of, there are times when you're at each other's throats, but if push comes to shove, the love is still constant.
Your book is an export. Where did you write the book?
I live in Lagos, so I wrote it here.
So the idea of it now being this global this global work that has gone to the ends of the earth. No residencies. Yeah. How is that? Can you share a little bit about that?
Okay.
Because it feels easier. It feels like this has happened, book published around the world.
Yeah.
Because in Nigeria, sometimes when people publish, quite a lot of people self-publish. So just this whole, how have you gone from, not having like formal channels of going to residency or having a fellowship to write a book, and being assured of a publisher and everything else afterwards? How did that go?
Okay, so I've been writing pretty much all my life. And I've always known I wanted to be an author. Like there's this book that we had in primary school. I went to primary school in England, and in the last year they would have you write what you wanted to be when you grew up. So I have proof that I've always wanted to be an author. And my degree was in, as you mentioned, was in creative writing and law. So I think because it's something I've been working at for a long time, and that was what my degree was in, I knew what to do. Last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was this year, I don't know. I spoke to a room full of writers in Nigeria, and I asked if any of them knew how to query an agent, and not one person raised their hand. So I don't know what it is about the environment here, but I always kind of knew what I was meant to do. So I think that helped. To me, it's been a very blessed journey. You write the book, but everything else that happens after that is out of your control. And what had happened was I had been shortlisted for, sorry, I'm saying a lot, but I had been shortlisted, I'm trying to think of the shortest way I have been shortlisted for the 2016 Short Story Prize, the Commonwealth Short Story Prize in 2016, and an agent reached out to me. So prior to that, I had this Excel spreadsheet of agents I was going to query. They were fantasy agents, because at the time, I'm still interested in fantasy, but at the time, I was convinced my first novel would be a fantasy novel. So I had a list. But I didn't query them, because even though I had written a fantasy novel, it was all over the place. Also, I've worked as an editor. I worked as an editor in Farafina in Nigeria for a little while, so I know what the industry is like, or I have an idea of what the industry is like here, and also what the industry is like abroad. So an agent contacted me after that, because she had seen my story I think she was on the panel of judges, I think. So she had seen my story, and she liked it, and they asked me if I had anything to give. And even though I had 2 novels at the time, I said no.
Why?
Because I felt like I would know when I had something that was tidy enough for me to say, okay, can you consider this for publishing? And I didn't think I had that. So, so I held back, and it was a year before I got back to her with, like the same month, like they had contacted me the year prior with this manuscript. And the only reason I sent her this, because like I said, I didn't write it to be published, was because my friend had read it and she said it was the best thing I had ever written, and I was a bit offended at the time. So and I self-published it, actually. It was on Okada Books, the novella format. It was on Okada Books. I think I put it on iBooks. So I self-published. I had no intention of sending it to a publisher, you know, and it got a few reviews then. So I thought, okay, let me go back and look at this book. I went back to it, and then I sent it to the agent. Because it was a novella, I didn't expect that she would be interested in it. I just wanted her to know I wasn't dead. So it was more like, you know, I've written this, but I'm working on a novel. Please don't forget about me. So I'll go on and on, but the rest is history. Like, you know, so that's how that got to that. So eventually she had me work on it, convert it to a novel. She got me the publishers, and it was the rest. It was easy from there.
Well done. I think there are many lessons there, and I think that many things people can learn about querying, about working with editors and things. Thank you. So, 4 books? 4 books?
4, yes. Yeah.
Can I ask if you're working on 5th, 6th, 7th?
I've written 6, actually. I've just shelved 2 because they didn't quite work. They worked very nicely at the beginning, and then I didn't follow the voices. I tried to make the characters do things that I wanted them to do, and they refused. So those books didn't work, and they're on my shelf, maybe permanently. But yeah, I am working. I guess this one would be my 7th one that I've written that will hopefully get published. But I think this is going to be a long journey. I think it'll be a few years before it goes out there. Yeah.
Did you always know you wanted to write?
I did, yeah. And at first I was a little delusional. I thought maybe I'd be a poet, haha. No, that didn't work out.
No, sorry. But there's some pretty good lines in the book, so you might still want to explore that.
Yeah, maybe. But then for a while I thought I'd be a screenwriter because of the way I think and the way that, you know, everything's so vivid. And but then I had a moment, I had this really big moment that happened in my life, and from that moment I knew right away that I was going to be a novelist. I was struggling with the guilt of being a survivor because I had lost so many of my peers when I was growing up. I lost them to apartheid and everything that comes with that, right? So I had survived all this stuff and I didn't really know how to deal with it. And then I read this gorgeous book by a Haitian American writer called Edwige Dantika. It's called The Farming of Bones. And it's just such a beautiful book, and I read it, I was on a train, and I read it from one stop to my stop, like from one point to another, and at the end of the train ride, I closed the book, and I was like, oh, I'm a novelist. I just knew, like, it was a moment for me. It wasn't so much like this big process, yeah. And from then on, it's just been novels, yeah.
I'm sorry about all the people you've lost, and thank you for sharing your stories as well. There's another part of your book. There are just some really beautiful paragraphs to me that really resonated, and one of them is, I'm just going to read a few lines. You're not taught to read women's minds. This is one of the main characters talking. You're not taught to read women's minds. You're taught that they want whatever you want. And I think that sentiment, that thought, there's a lot of confusion. So the book is supposed to be young adult, kind of book. I think it's to me, there's the element of coming of age in so many ways, and just the sentiment about this dichotomy and this divide between what women mean when they say no, and this disbelief that we still see, and it still starts off as a joke, and I think you capture that quite well. And also the tussle between honor and violation, and who you protect, and why you make the choice to protect them.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
And I do want to say that it is, sold as a young adult novel, but she is in her 20s. She runs into the victim and starts reflecting on that time. So it is an adult going back to her teenage years, to talk about the story,
There's so many things I loved in the book, because it feels as though I was a child, or I was a young adult around the same time she was, because there's talk of Boys to Men and Vogue and Teddy Pendergrass, and all that is just, I was just laughing in those bits. And there was another bit at the start that really actually connected me to the book. So many people, I love food, I write about food, I eat, I cook, but I didn't do that till I was 9 years old. And when I was 9, I lived in Warri, which is in the south of Nigeria, southern coast. My father took my sister and I to Edinburgh, and the first time I ate properly without threat or tears was at a place called Wimpy. And Wimpy was like I like to think of it as a precursor to McDonald's. So it was really fascinating to open her book and have one of the characters sitting in Wimpy's, and it's just like I got goosebumps. Like, I feel like the book was written for me. So is that true?
Well, obviously.
Thank you very much. Thank you. But that just really, and I think it's just these. I have a friend, Ife, and he always talks about word building and how when people write, how they craft things, and sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's someone sleeping or someone eating, and those things that really make us human, that anchor us to humanity. And I think you did that brilliantly in the book. It was such a pleasurable read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's important to put your people on the map, because I think we're erased from maps, right? And so I think it's important when I write books to say, hey, this is where we are, and I think a lot of the references are really, I like when people can say, oh, I saw myself in that, or I remember the time in my life in that, because it's just a way of saying we matter, really, more than anything,
You did it brilliantly, thank you. So Oyinkan, Lagos, and mapping and geography, I liked how you navigated a little bit about the city of Lagos. Do you think that was the only place you could have set the story in Nigeria? I like the mention of Third Mainland Bridge as a site of interest in the story. So was it important to you to, in some ways, celebrate Lagos or capture the diversity and maybe the dark side of the city?
You know what, I always say that I'm so glad I studied in Lagos. I don't remember exactly, I think I probably considered writing it somewhere else. But I'm so glad I did it in Lagos because, first of all, the reason why I ended up doing Lagos is because I'm in Lagos and my memory is terrible. So if I'm not seeing it, it's very hard for me to describe it, so it was just easier because I was here. But also, I'm so glad I did because I didn't have to worry about, like all this sophisticated crime scene equipment that will turn up afterwards and they use the blue light to show the blood. I don't know if you guys have seen all of that in Lagos. I haven't, so I just imagine that it's not here. So it made it easier for me because there are things that, like, some people have accused me of some things regarding this book, and I'm just like, well, do you know what? I've been to lots of, like, somebody asked me about CCTV, and I'm like, I've been to loads of flats that don't have, like, apartment blocks that don't have CCTV. Yeah, I don't know, maybe people are living on a different side of, maybe they're in Eco Atlantic, but, like, as far as I know, and then even with lights, the street lamps and things like that, how you can drive in pitch darkness for a bit before you see, street lamps. So as far as my story goes, Lagos was such a central part to a lot of things. They wouldn't have gotten away with it if they weren't in Lagos, but also it allowed me to kind of, I'm not particularly political, but as I wrote it, it allowed me to explore sort of the fact that we don't have these things, and the fact that you can bribe an officer, and you can get someone to look another way. So yeah.
So I'm just going to read one last thing from your story, talk about for 30 seconds, and I want to talk about jealousy and envy in relationships. So this chapter is titled Flaw. So you people share the same father and mother. She told you she's my sister, but is she your full sister? She looks kind of mixed. Inka is starting to piss me off. The sad thing is that her questions are neither the most obnoxious I've received in my lifetime, nor the most uncommon. After all, Ayola is short, her only flaw, if you consider that to be a flaw. Whereas I'm almost 6 feet tall. Ayola's skin is a color that sits comfortably between cream and caramel, and I'm the color of a Brazil nut before it's peeled. She's made wholly of curves, and I'm composed only of hard edges. So this thing about jealousy and envy in relationships, I sort of sense that in both books, that one sibling was, there was a tussle and a dilemma between seeing the sibling for who they were in totality, and then maybe there just being a twinge of envy. So can you confirm or not? And then we're going to go to questions.
Yeah, so it was very important for me. I think also I stole a little bit from my experience, but also just generally seeing women. I think women are compared a lot. I mean, if there are guys here and guys feel like they're compared a lot, I'm not sure, but I feel like women are compared a lot, especially for their outward appearance. And sisters are compared a lot. I've got a sister who's about 6 years younger than me, and as I'm graduating, she's entering. So we went to the same secondary school for half, like a second, and she would say, "Oh, people would be like, why can't you be more like your sisters?" And she would get that sort of thing. And I remember once I was talking to an auntie, and she told me that she says, "Oh, that used to be the prettiest one, and out of nowhere, the one after you has just taken over." And it was my first time kind of, first of all, considering, had I been the prettiest? What had happened? Why wasn't I the prettiest anymore? Did it matter that I wasn't the prettiest anymore? Looking at my sister as a competitor in this department, like, oh my gosh, now she's finer than me, and what does that mean? And I think just generally, when it comes to appearances, you don't tell yourself you're beautiful. The world tells you whether or not you're beautiful or whether or not you're ugly. You don't determine that for yourself. So for Korede and Ayola, it was important for me to, beauty is a big thing for me in this book anyway, but it was important for me to examine that, a lot of these things that she decides, she didn't decide for herself. The world decided it for herself, and she's imbibed it. So now she's saying it as though it were fact, but she didn't. It's everybody else who told her that you're not attractive and your sister is.
She's not come to that conclusion herself.
Yeah, I think in this book, Betrays My Brother, the world's love for Naledi's brother is so complete and so overwhelming that there isn't even room for her jealousy I think she says she learns from the very, very beginning that he just is special and she just isn't. And so I think she doesn't even, and she loves him so much that she doesn't even allow herself room to feel anything negative about it, because that in itself feels like betrayal for her, because everyone is taught, especially her, that he is just so perfect. And I think that even when the thoughts come to her that why is he loved more than I am, why is our mother so much more adoring of him, she stops those thoughts because that feels like betrayal for her.
Thank you both. The floor is open for questions, comments. Who'd like to go first? Okay, someone behind you.
Hello, my name is Norma. I have a question for you, Oyinkan, but before I go into that, I was thinking while we were setting up, and I was sitting down right in front here, and I was thinking how wonderful it is that there are 3 women on the stage, and how literary spaces are such a wonderful place for women. And then you said what you said about being at the last literary festival, and how you were accosted. And you know, and I had to reassess again. I had to go back and think, oh well, they're really, sorry? Okay. You know, so I was thinking how these kind of spaces are safe places for women and our thoughts and togetherness. And then I like the fact that you shared that, and I had to go back and reassess and think, oh no, there really isn't any safe place.
No, there really isn't, no. And I mean, and we never know when it is gonna feel safe and when it's not. I mean, there was an incident last night that made it feel not so safe. And then there was, when I had that happen in Durban, we had to run. We ran out of there. And I remember standing at the elevator, pressing and hoping it opens. Please, please, please open before these men come. So yeah, we never know. Sometimes we do think that it's a safe space, but a lot of the time it isn't.
Thank you for sharing that. Oyinkan, I wanted to ask about your time. You said you always knew you wanted to be a writer, and you studied creative writing and law at Kingston. What was Kingston like? What was education like? I'd like some background into Kingston.
What was Kingston like? And
for your education as a creative, yes, what was it like?
A long time ago. Okay, so I mean, it was a joint degree, but I had the 2 different campuses, so creative writing, so they didn't really seep into one another. I went to the law campus for the law stuff, went to different campus for the creative writing. As far as the creative writing went, you know, you could, I think after the first year, you could choose one module, so I always leaned towards poetry. I really enjoyed my screenwriting classes. Kind of flunked, I mean, I didn't fail it, but the songwriting, apparently I can't write songs. So it was, I think one thing I'm grateful for is that, and this is the thing for anybody who's thinking about creative writing, I mean, by all means do it, but one thing I was grateful for, I think a writer can do on their own, in their own time, is that it forced me to A, read books I wouldn't normally read, B, write in styles I wouldn't normally consider writing in. So now I have a habit of, when I see a writer do something interesting, and not with story, but like stylistically do something interesting, I think about it and I think, you know, is that something I'm interested in doing? Or you know, just try it and see where that will lead you. And I'm a big fan of prompts, which maybe I got that from the creative writing course as well, I'm not sure. But after that, I've still gone on to do online workshops. I buy books on writing all the time, have loads, so yeah.
Hi. Hori, nice to see you again. Oh.
Someone speaking?
Oh.
Okay.
So Oyinkan, we were on a panel together at Open Book Festival, and you mentioned that it was important for you to write that book because you were so tired of women. You know, you've never seen a woman who has acted out of character. You know, who acts out of character. So it's like creating a character who actually goes against all expectations. Can you speak a little more about that? You know, the drive to create a sister who, I mean, yes, the beauty part is there, but, you know, she does very dark things.
Yeah, so this experience has been interesting because I've realized, you know, I've been a little bit concerned as well how many women sort of jumped on this book as yes, finally, you know, because obviously it's a book about a woman who kills lots of men. And so that's been interesting. But when I'm sort of asked, why do I have this character? I've had people say, oh, there's no such thing as female serial killers, or, oh, black people wouldn't do this sort of thing. And I don't agree. I actually don't think there's anything that a woman can't do. I think it's more likely that women, first of all, there have been female serial killers, but I also think that it's more likely that women are getting away with it and men aren't. Partly because they're being overlooked, but also because we're just tidier. So, but yeah, so I don't know. For me, there's nothing a woman, because I was asked actually the other day how to create a character that's, not this two-dimensional woman that's docile or just perfect, really nice, kind to everyone. And I said, I don't think it's, there's art there, there's craft there, but I think it's more realizing that people aren't like that, men or women. Nobody is, there are people who do nice things for not so nice reasons. They have, even if it's just for the sake of puffing themselves up, like, oh my gosh, she did this, she gave to this, or, she did that. I think once you realize that people really aren't very nice, then it opens up the possibilities then are endless. So I don't know if I've answered that question, but okay. And it's nice to see you, Nicole. Yeah.
Hello, Oyinkan.
Hi.
This question is for you. Okay, so it's more of a comment. So what I loved about your book was the infusion of social media. So we are in this age where, what I loved about your book was the infusion of social media. Twitter, hashtag trends, Instagram, and I figured that that's something a lot of writers try to shy away from. So it's as though once they infuse contemporary social media or contemporary millennial happenings in their book, then they kind of seem very unserious. And even in a session where Waitu was talking, she said something about how generally people just, rather than say he was typing away on his Facebook profile, they would say he was staring deeply into his phone, trying to shy away from that. So that's what I really loved about your book. And so why did you think it was necessary? Because I'm asking this, I know you've talked about it before with me, but I feel like a lot of people are not yet open to that contemporary use of social media. And it's a reality now. So just talk about it.
Okay, so this book was my first time including social media, and I hadn't started out with the intention of including social media, but I started writing the book, and then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm writing a contemporary story set in Lagos with two women in their 20s. It's weird that because I don't know any that aren't, interacting with social media. So I had the same fear, because I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to make my work seem tacky. But I started it, and once I started it, I got into it because I realized that it was actually furthering one of the things that I was examining in the novel, which was the way that society engages with beauty. And I think social media is, you project the best of yourself on social media. On Twitter, it's how clever, how intelligent, or how witty am I. On Instagram, it's I'm living my best life. You're always projecting the best of yourself, but really, the question then is, how is your life really? I have this sort of, I've decided that all those people who are tweeting these death threats are sitting on the toilet, doing number 2. So I just think that what you're just seeing this very, people have presented themselves. So it furthered what I was trying to do. And once I got into it, that it didn't feel like this tacky thing anymore. It was just, it felt easy, and yeah.
Okay, we have 10 more minutes. Any other questions? And if not, I'd like to ask both authors to answer questions that no one else has asked, or tell us something that you think we should know. I know, just so random. I'd like to go first.
Okay, let me make public service announcement that I don't hate men, because I have been asked, and this isn't a revenge fantasy either. And please, nobody use my book as an accessory to any crime.
Thank you.
I actually can't think of anything people haven't asked me yet. So, yeah, no. I don't have a brother, I'll say that. People ask me all the time, is it autobiographical? And I say, well, I don't have a brother, so yeah.
But do you have siblings? Do you have sister? Do you have a sister?
I do, I have 3 sisters, yeah.
So, one of the things in your book that made me laugh was, you know how you're growing up and sometimes you're running a bath and you're just really enjoying this bath, and then your mother comes and says, I hope you know that in some countries there's drought or there's no water, and here you are being wasting or throwing that last bit of dodo away because you're full, and how they're hungry children. And so I could also really connect. There's a part in the book where the parents say something about lack of water in Ethiopia, and just how there are things that cut across cultures and times. Because I have 3 children, and sometimes I do have to, maybe not as blatant as that, but sometimes I do have to call them and kind of mirror their situations with situations of people, not just around the world, but in Lagos, and let them understand privilege. And there was, part of the story is a moving up, right?
Right.
The family moves
Right.
up, and they move out of the
lower end of the township,
and there's that tension between how do we, now that we've left, who maintains the relationships between where we're coming from and where we're going. So this kind of past, present, future tension.
Yeah.
And I think that was evident throughout the book.
Yeah, and that whole lack of water, there's no water in Ethiopia thing was really making fun of middle-class South Africans who like to think that there are problems in the world, but they're like somewhere out there in another country, there's famine in another country, there's lack of water in another country, and that happens a lot with middle-class South Africa, where they are not looking at what's happening right around them. So there's lack of water down in the township where they live, where the people they interact with every day live. But they're not able to make that connection because they need to be so separate from the rest of their community. And that was just kind of, making fun of that, because that's the part of South Africa I grew up in. I was making fun of that, my group of people there, yeah.
And I think that's very important, being able to be in a place and actually be in that place, and understand the dynamics, the issues, write about them, speak about them. So, you've both raised things about the places where your stories have been situated, about how they kind of spotlight things that could be better, that could be different, and whether that's ways of thinking, whether that's infrastructure. And I think that's very, very important. Yeah. Honestly, I really enjoyed both books, and I'm really honored to be sitting here and talking. There's a question? Okay. Maybe the last one, sure.
Hi, Oyinka, I loved your book, and I was hoping you could read your favorite passage from it. You guys are here to read.
To read. Would you like to?
I don't think this is my favorite passage, but we're gonna go with it. So, do you have a favorite part? I don't know. The part there's there's a really, I think the darkest part in the book is what I consider to be the darkest part in the book, because I feel like it kind of roots the whole, like it anchors, thank you. It anchors the whole story. Yeah, and it wasn't in the first draft. But you know what? It has a Yoruba sentence there, so let me not disgrace myself. I'm just going to do this one, because I think this is cool. Okay. Femi Durand is missing has been hashtag Femi Durand is missing has been sidelined by hashtag Niger Jollof versus Kenyan Jollof. People may be drawn to the macabre, but never for very long. And so news of Femi's disappearance has been trumped by conversations about which country's jollof rice is better. Besides, he was almost 30, not a child. I read the comments. Some people say he probably got fed up and left Lagos. Some suggest that perhaps he killed himself. In an effort to keep people caring about Femi, his sister has started posting his poetry from his blog, www.wildthoughts.com. I can't help but read them. He was very talented. I found the quiet in your arms, the nothing that I search for daily. You are empty and I am full, fully drowning. I wonder if this poem was about her, if he knew. What are you looking at? I slammed the lid of my laptop closed. Ayola is framed in the doorway of my bedroom. I narrow my eyes at her. Tell me what happened with Femi again, I ask her. Why? Just humor me. I don't want to talk about it. It's upsetting to even think about. You said he was aggressive toward you. Yes. As in he grabbed you. Yes. And you tried to run? Yes. But there was a stab wound in his back. She sighs. Look, I was afraid and then I kind of saw red. I don't know. Why were you afraid? He was threatening me, threatening to like hit me and stuff. He had me cornered. But why? Why was he so angry? I don't remember. I think he saw some messages from a guy on my phone or something and he just flipped. So he cornered you? How did you get to the knife? It was in your bag, wasn't it? She pauses. I don't know. It was all a blur. I'd take it back if I could. I'd take it all back.
And on this note, I'd like to say thank you for spending your time with us. I'd like to say a big thank you to Kagiso, and thank you, Oyinkan. Like I said, I really enjoyed both stories, the complexity of relationships, friendships, family, childhood trauma, sibling rivalries, ride or die. So many themes that are familiar, but just told very beautifully and very deftly. That's the word, right? Yeah, deftly. I enjoyed them both. Thank you for spending time with us and honoring us with your presence. Thank you very much. Have a good day.